Gentlemen, we are live. Good evening.
Thank you.
Welcome to the first briefing meeting that includes a discussion of our budget. Tonight, we also had some previous items that we were going to try to continue from our last meeting because we had a number of questions that we didn't work through. So I'm looking at our council members present are Mr. Smitherman, Mrs. Welch, Ms. Hunt, Mr. Franklin, and Ms. Foster. So I believe we are all here and accounted for.
You didn't call my name, Mayor.
Oh, well, how about, it's probably because of the t-shirt you're wearing. That's okay. And Dr. Sadler is also here. Town staff that's available is Town Manager Hank Perkins, Town Planner Stacy Tolbert, Town Finance Director Pam Orell, and Town Attorney Bo Houff. We also have our guest tonight, Mike Norris, who is with McGill and Associates, to talk us through our discussion tonight we're going to have on Part F. With that, council members, we do have a lengthy agenda this evening. Have there been any changes or additions since you received this? Anybody wish to make any changes?
Hey, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Question before we go forward. Are we missing Joyce?
We are, but I'm not sure that's intentional or not.
I don't either. How about it, Hank?
I will give her a call.
I mean, I'm just asking. I mean,
Yeah, we need her.
if we got the attorney,
Well, she may, she's actually pulling the minutes from the tape of this.
Yeah, I made notes, but I'm not sure it's as good as what Joyce does.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's not.
Well, she would need to be transcribing from the tape anyway.
like I guess, as long as the tape is running, if Bo agrees, we can probably go on.
Yeah, she can probably join us here.
Yeah, I mean,
momentarily. Okay. Well, let's go ahead, council members. There's an agenda in front of us. I didn't hear any changes or additions. May I have a motion to approve?
So
Looks like
moved.
Mrs. Hunt makes the motion, and Dr. Sadler, or Mrs. Welch, let's give it to Dr. Sadler since I ignored him in the introductions, makes the second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. That's our agenda this evening. Okay, Hank, I think you were going to lead us in with Mike on our Part F discussion. Jean Marie, do you have any comments going into this, or do you just want to flow through the presentation as we're going now?
Yeah, I think so. Hank and I had some communication. I think they have it under control.
Perfect. Gentlemen, you're on. Except you're both muted. Do you know sign language?
Okay, Mike, let's see, where should we start? You guys were sent late this afternoon a revised site plan. What you're going to see, I'm going to throw it up here on the screen for you, if it'll allow me to do this, is everything that was mentioned in the survey. It's all black, not to indicate whether or not it's intended to be on this year or future years. The only thing that is not here is the Frisbee golf, and that's because it's such a large amenity site-wise, but so it's not there. But in the lower left-hand corner, you will see a list of all of the features and a cost opinion from McGill and Associates. What we need to get to this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is to discuss the amenities. Mike is here. He's been through the survey results. He has a sort of a report himself to get through to you and to discuss it, and then to talk about the ways in which we move forward for this year's and maximizing future grant application cycles. And then after we finish this, we will talk about what comes next and what to expect that council will need to do on our way to submitting the application by the deadline of June 1st.
Very good.
Okay.
Michael, you have the stage.
Okay, thanks, Hank. What I would first like to, what we feel like would be best, and Hank, if you could put that back up
Yeah,
on
just,
the screen,
all right.
but take one step back of what we discussed last Thursday night and look holistically at the master plan. Number one, just to kind of see how things are put together, see the relationship with all the amenities. Obviously, this is a master plan, so things are flexible. They could be moved and shifted. And as we talked and discussed from last Thursday night's meeting, is how would a dog park fit within the master plan versus a disc golf course? Number one. Number two, I wanted to just see kind of the scale of a typical dog park or size wise. So this is roughly 1 acre, which is indicative of a minimum size for a dog park. You see 3/4 of this dedicated to a larger dog, and then 1/4 of the space, 1/4 acre basically, being for a small dog. Now, it doesn't need to be square. No, it can be of a different type of shape and fit with the landscape or what have you. But I would recommend some thinning of vegetation. Typically, it'd be nice to have some shade, but most of the time these dog parks do have a grassed area for running and kind of keep out vermin and different types of things to be a deterrent to having a dog park. But what I felt like might be good though is taking that step back, and here's what we have. We know what's there. The proposed amenities, including a splash pad, natural play area, community garden. Of course, the the community center would be that major element here we're looking at. Also, there's the amphitheater, and then the nature trail and walking trails, which connect to the different amenities, whether existing or new, as well as up in the existing park, we've added the tennis/pickleball courts. So there's what I feel like is a good balance of recreational amenities that we're proposing. Now, with the current development, we have a good variety. The question that we probably want to revisit is, well, what do we want to include if we want to apply for a Part F grant application? What's the pleasure of the council? And what I mean by that is we have some survey results. I mentioned to Hank, a lot of times when we get results back, sometimes we typically choose many of the top amenities, the top 5. However, it may not be all, or it may not be the number 1 amenity. Sometimes it's for budgetary constraints. Sometimes it's because if we know there's going to be a future Part F grant application, we want to make sure that we have some really good amenities to make that grant application attractive. So there's a couple different factors there. This Part F grant application would be significant because 2 of the recreational amenities that you would be including in this application are composed within the community center. So the question was asked, well, what makes the Part F grant application attractive? Well, there's the what I call the magic 3 to maximize your points in it. The Part F grant application is composed of a number of different factors. One is your location. Part F, and Dr. Sadler, you can comment on this as well. I'm sure you're very familiar, but they look at Part F grant applications within that region. First, how much are they allocating for the state over that year? But one thing that we as consultants can help control is trying to obtain as many points as possible to make your grant application score as well as it can. So as we talked last Thursday night about having three amenities maximizes, three new amenities will maximize the number of points in that category. There's several different categories in the Part F grant application, but that one is one that we can easily obtain because we got two components in the community center. And then we have a third one that we can discuss tonight. But a third amenity. It's not a support facility like a parking lot or a bathroom, but it would be a recreational amenity. We've shown over in the left-hand bottom left side of the diagram exhibit here of costs for all of these amenities, ranging from the nature trail down to the dog park. Obviously, a dog park is fairly inexpensive. It's typically primarily fencing. Occasionally some, and many communities are starting to do this, they'll extend a water line there for watering for a pet. Sometimes they are lit for use of the park and safety and security. But we've got an approximate cost there of $17,000 for that. But there's a number of amenities there. Obviously, we have a community survey there that we may want to discuss, but there's some good amenities that were favorable from the public, if we want to talk about that. But I just want to kind of step back and let's look at the master plan as it stands and see if you feel like this is the direction you want to go with. Obviously, as I mentioned, it is flexible though. So I'd like to see if there's get some response from that.
Council members, who's up? Ms. Foster, I think maybe you're invested up to your kneecaps in this one. Why don't you jump in?
Can we see all members of council, please?
Sure.
Jean Marie, you're muted, please. You're still muted.
Where'd she go?
And now you're gone. Okay, Ms. Hunt.
So thank you very much, first of all, Mike. You guys have come back and done a great job on giving us the information, I think, in the format that we were requesting. So thank you very much for that. I think my first thought is there can you start by walking us through the amenities? And I've got some questions as to like, what is future public art, like what that looks like? What does that mean? I think that's one of my questions. How is the amphitheater different than what we already currently have in Louisville is another question. So I don't know what's the easiest way or if that's something we've already kind of thrown, I think for me, it would be easy for me to understand if we went amenity by amenity and then we could have discussion if needed on those amenities.
Okay. Let's pull the site plan back up, and I'll kind of start from right to left. and one, as I mentioned, several features can be located at a different area. However, there is some reasoning behind a variety of these things. One is that I feel like the recreation center is probably it might be rotated a little bit, but it's probably in a pretty good location. One thing I want, and you can't see my cursor here moving, but I'm moving it around to where we have reserved for future development. We've kind of set that aside. There's things that I'd say 15 years ago, the term pickleball, maybe some of you were familiar with pickleball, but not many people. So there, 15 years from now in 2035, there's probably something else in the recreation world that's going to be coming up, and we want to think about reserving space for that. The amphitheater. This is more what I would call more of a smaller scale. It's located in a sloped area where all those, it kind of captures a rolling hillside where it's not too steep, but it again captures that small, quaint, almost like an outdoor classroom. Again, more of a quarter of an acre, relatively small. You based on what we had learned from the community, it's very active. You may have a desire to have more than one type of function or performance, and this just offers another venue. There may be activities there at the recreation center. Who knows what might be happening years from now, or how it might be programmed, where you could have that as a summer program for kids or what have you, where it's right there at the park. We have an area, as I continue up to the left above that, is the potential for tennis pickleball courts, although we haven't talked about that heavily as being a potential for included in this grant application. Pickleball is a growing sport. It's actually a lot of seniors like, including myself. Pickleball is that avenue to where a lot of adds a different user group, and but you need to play it with desire there. Then the
So we're getting some banging going on that's kind of cut and making. Is that happening in anybody's? I guess if you're not talking, go ahead and mute yourself, because we're getting some banging of stuff that's happening. Thank you.
The dog park. Again, that can be at that's fairly flexible as far as location. However, you would like to have it. I don't like putting dog parks right beside playgrounds, just because of interaction with younger kids and dogs. There may be a little bit of caution there. I also want to consider access. You typically, with accessible parking is important. Having this to where I'm not having to walk my dog through an entire park area to get to that location. So there is some consideration for that. We've kind of put this in an area where it's fairly close to the existing parking. However, there will be, based on the location where parking is, there wasn't a whole lot of flexibility with this one. Continuing on, if anybody has any questions, just jump in.
I do.
Left, we have the splash pad.
Ms. Foster, would you like to jump in at this point with a question?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize, you guys. I think we're all still working through kinks, and I was completely lost, and I apologize for that. I missed some of the key things, obviously, you said, so I'm behind the 8 ball here. So you all sound like you're talking about the dog park as a potential amenity. Did we back up all the way back in terms of sort of the process for how we're going to make our decision for tonight?
I think, Hank, didn't you indicate that was going to be you'll go through that process at the end of it, or would you rather have it up front here?
For me, I'm trying to get a handle on, so I understand by the time we're done that, Hank, you had indicated we wanted to get our minds around what our commitment is as a council in terms of the match, what we want the amenity to be.
Jean Marie, what we're doing is we're going through the site plan, and the site plan has everything on it,
Right.
Except for the disc golf, because the disc golf is too big
Right.
to fit in for it.
Okay. Yep.
But in the site plan, you'll see in the left-hand corner, we've got all of the list of information, how much it costs.
Right.
What we need to move to this evening is to finalize the site plan for those amenities that will be going into the application for this year. All other amenities will be designated as future year. So that's what we're doing right now. Mike Norris has been asked to go through each of the amenities and explain what they are and be able to answer anybody's questions pertaining to any of the amenities individually.
So that's what I missed.
Okay.
Is that right?
I think that's right.
Okay, so you guys are on pickleball.
Right.
right?
We had we'd gotten through ball, went through the disc golf, and was
Okay.
we were getting into. I was going to describe the splash pad area,
Okay, thank you.
and the splash pad area I would recommend a relatively small splash pad. Number one, this needs to complement, in my opinion, and you could tell me, Mike, you're wrong. We need to think about this differently, but you've got a very limited amount of parking, and I think a splash pad could be done, but I wouldn't make it the main attraction. I think it would need to complement the existing facilities and proposed amenities. I like having splash pads close to a playground because you could imagine you've got smaller kids. Some want to go to the playground. They want to go run back to the splash pad. So having those two together, that's an important relationship. In fact, down the road, you may decide that you would like to add a picnic shelter close to that, in that vicinity there where the splash pad and the playground is, just so that mom and dad can, or grandparents can observe without being within the midst of little Jimmy and Sister Sarah. So this particular splash pad, I'd recommend a recirculating system. As I mentioned, I believe in our last meeting, this is a system that's very somewhat conceptually to a swimming pool where you got a treatment facility that's treating that water. It's recirculating back through the system, versus a drainaway system or a flush system where you're buying water and you're just flushing it to a sewer system. A natural play area. This is something where actually this is growing in importance with kids, where it's more of like a natural play area where you may have logs, you may have wooden structures, or something that's atypical to what we typically see in playgrounds, where it's a commercial bright orange, green, blue with all the bells and whistles. This is kind of the concept, is to get kids back to where it's okay to walk on a log or to swing on a limb. So it's more that get in the dirt, play around, sandbox type of play amenity there. This is very organic, but I see a growing demand for these types of areas if you haven't seen those. Community garden. This location, I think there are better areas for that. However, and just because of folks who like to use community gardens are typically not in their teens. So access is important there. However, that may be something you want to think about down the road, as far as, is this an important amenity for this park, or does it need to be at another park?
Hey, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think I was on mute. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question about the natural playground. Are those typically handicap accessible or wheelchair accessible, or are there more like logs? Are they?
There are things, and that's why we put it up closer to the splash pad area. You can make some of these accessible. For instance, a roll-in and sandbox, where it's elevated sandbox, where I could roll a wheelchair or something like that there to have an amenity, or the whole play area may not be accessible, but we try to have one element there that would be accessible for that use.
Thank you. I apologize. Go back. Thank you.
That's good. That's actually a really good question.
Mike, can I jump in 1 second? You had made a comment too, as far as handicapped accessibility, that there are different types of handicaps that are not necessarily physical. You talked about kids on the autism spectrum, and how even, wheelchairs and crutches and things are not the end all be all of handicapped accessibility.
Yep.
Right. But I would keep this in mind, that I may have a child that's physically able to do that. However, I may have a disability where I have to have my wheelchair or something get to that access to watch my child. So there's two caveats there that we always try to cognizant of. The nature trail would not be a paved trail. However, we do want to make this as when I say accessible, we want to make this as of ease as possible for for most folks to utilize this trail. The idea, as we talked at the last meeting, is this would be a meandering trail where we try to work with the land and the vegetation to make it attractive, to make it feel like we're in the woods, to connect to different things that we currently don't have on this site. So I think that would be a really cool area for this particular site and where it's located. And then the solid black trails would be more of the paved hard surface trail that I think would be important for and as you can see, we did extend that paved trail down to the lower side of the amphitheater, so that would be accessible. I've tried to cover quick Cliff Notes version of the amenities that we're proposing. Any questions before we go to the next line of questioning?
Can you touch on the public art, future public art?
Public art. And public art that's something that it can be a number of different things. We're not putting our finger on it needs to be this type. It could be interpretive signage. It could be talking about, it may be a windmill. It may be whimsical. It may be something to introduce local artists into our parks to have displays of sculpture. Or it could be telling a story. It could be interpretive signage to maybe it shows the old homestead of, hey, this is how an active farm used to be back in the 19th century, or what was done here on this piece of property 100 years ago. So there's a number of different things this could be, but we feel like art's an important element, and why not have it in our parks where we can.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the plan, the layout? Anyone have any concerns about the layout?
Mike,
Yes, sir.
if we were to look at each one of these individually, does the nature trail count as an amenity?
I would count this as an amenity.
Okay.
I think it offers a park experience there.
Okay. So would the additional path paving count as an amenity, as a connector to existing Jack Warren Park?
No, I would not. I would count this more as a facility that connects to your different amenities. This is more of a in fact, you're required as part of Part F to provide accessibility to each amenity. So I would not. I would encourage you, even if you didn't apply for a Part F grant, I would encourage you to have that trail connector there tying to the existing park from the recreation or the community center.
Okay. So the dotted line is the nature trail. So as I look at this, it starts up by the community center, wanders down, takes a fork. One fork goes left, one fork goes right.
Right.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, that's a great comment. You don't have to do both forks. You could just do a spine connector there that ties into the splash pad, for that matter, for this phase, and build another trail later on. There's no magic there.
Council, any questions on the site? Any questions on the amenities? What's your feeling? Do we like what we see?
Just a comment on the nature trail. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jean Marie, go ahead.
Sorry. I would suggest that there be a connection so that the nature trail actually has a loop where you don't have to go through the playground to stay on the nature trail. So my options are either I go on the existing paved Jack Warren Park trail, or I pop through the playground. So just for consideration, I don't think that would impact the budget too much in terms of the 73,000 that's listed.
Sure.
That's more of a functionality issue. That's my only comment now.
So you don't have to backtrack. You can have a loop.
Yep.
All right.
Could I jump in there? Jean Marie, I think that ties into that parking lot there where the public art thing would be, so that you can hit the trail there and then walk back up toward the community center. And then if you want to bear back to the hard right and walk back down to the current trails and all, and then finish back up around the playground.
Mhm.
But instead of taking, I know you can't see my cursor, but instead of taking that entrance off of the parking lot and taking it down to the existing trail, I don't know that that would work. Otherwise, I'm not sure what you're asking there.
Well, I'm saying if I'm on the nature trail, no, I realize I could leave and walk the parking lot, which I do. Currently, I use Jack Warren Park a lot right now. But I'm imagining if I'm on the nature trail and I just want to stay immersed in the nature trail, just before the natural play area, just perhaps at the lower version of that, having just a cut across to just create a loop. That's all. Again, that's
Okay.
getting,
Yeah, I understand what you're saying now. All right.
Thanks.
But still tying to the parking lot.
Yep.
All right. I'm with you.
Yep.
Hey, Mayor.
Ms. Hunt.
So one thing that, I think to answer your question is, I think it looks great. Again, I think I mentioned that earlier, but I wanted to address and just make a comment regarding the dog park. And for just council to consider, we do have other properties within Louisville that have been given to us. And Mayor, I may be jumping to where we were going to go at some point, but that have been given to us. And I just, for council to take into consideration that particular amenity may be more appropriate for another parcel of land as we move forward. So as you're looking at the numbers, just that's something to consider.
And if I can piggyback on what Melissa's saying, I couldn't agree more. I spent my time sort of looking at and walking through what are all of our existing amenities, from everything from thinking about the 421 River Park against the Yadkin River to Town Square that we know so well, to maybe some of these carve-out areas that we aren't as familiar with, like Melissa is saying, with regard to things with potential new functionality. So I guess backing all the way up for me, we know that the community center is going to bring a whole different complexion to the existing Jack Warren Park. So as I'm understanding in terms of where you guys want to take us next, we need to now decide what of these amenities within what amount of a budget we want to pursue. Is that right?
That would be the goal.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mayor, just for the record, I want to make sure I also clearly state that although I'm not convinced that the dog park is appropriate for this parcel, I am still a huge advocate for us putting things together and moving forward on a dog park.
Mike, let me ask you this question. Does our Part F grant, does it have to be restricted to one site, or can it incorporate two different sites?
Are you saying, asking if it could you also spend monies towards another park?
Yeah.
No, it has to be dedicated to this project area.
Okay. Got it.
It'd be nice if it were the other way, but
Yeah.
actually no, it's.
I think on this site plan, we're not really saying that anything that has been expressed as being important on the survey from the residents that have answered this is not going to happen or is not important. I think it's just going to end up being a spot where we think everything is worthy. If we like the site plan, it's just a question of the phasing of when these amenities will be placed in and what makes sense to go forward in the first phase, and then what is left over and how can we maximize future phases of applications.
Correct.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I think that the way I'm looking at this right now is we need to choose for $350,000, $400,000, we need to choose what we want to put in this park right now.
Right.
We can show all this other stuff, other places for future consideration, but that doesn't mean we're going to do an art center or a community garden or any of these things that are not included in the first phase of what we're asking for funding for. So I guess our task ahead of us is let's take a look at, for $350,000, $400,000, what of these amenities are here, or are there other amenities that we want to try to, that we would like to incorporate in the first phase of our Part F grant application? Does that get us where we need to be?
Yeah, you could exceed that slightly, but you're in the ballpark.
Question.
True,
It's just minimum.
But I've got a comment. You can exceed that. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
sure, Mike.
You can exceed that. Or the big picture is you're going to maximize your 387,000. I believe that's what the amount was for your land donation value in your community building. I mean, so even if you spent $100,000 on a park amenity outside of the recreation or the community center, that's more money of your match money from the donation that's applied towards your community center. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, Mike, say that again. I'm not sure that I understood that completely.
So if you had a recreational amenity that was, let's just say it's $100,000. So your community center development plus that recreation amenity, that third amenity that we're talking about, let's say it's now 5.1 million. Okay, $1 million for a community center, $100,000 for the other recreational amenity. I'm just talking round numbers. So if I've got 387,000 that I can use for my match, I've got $100,000 of that towards that new amenity, but the 287,000 can be applied towards for reimbursement towards that community center.
Right.
I see. So in other words, okay, let me restate that and let me see if I got it clear. What you're saying is that, let's say we want to do 3 amenities, but we only choose one, and the price tag is going to be $100,000, which is outside of the community center.
Correct. Yes.
We then can take the remaining $287,000 and apply it to our investment in the community center, our 2 investments in the community center.
Correct, because we're included that in the grant application.
Got it.
And can you just remind us what the 2 amenities are that are being included in the community center that we've been referencing?
You've got a multi-purpose room,
Okay, right.
art activity room, which there's more amenities there, but I believe that's, I don't want to go and stretch it out and not be valid with authority, but I believe those 2 are valid, and they would be labeled on that architectural plan for that.
So Michael, let me give you a hypothetical. We're looking at AV equipment that is substantially more than what the architect has budgeted. And that AV equipment is going to go in the multi-purpose room and in the art activity center room. We could apply this grant to the purchase of that AV material?
As long as it's being applied towards the community center, at the end of the day, you have to have an art activity room and a multi-purpose room. So if you decide, hey, I want gold-plated doorknobs or AV equipment, I've just got to provide that amenity to that recreation center.
Yeah. To answer, I guess to put it in, we're not doing anything specific line item application of the funds. It's just to the overall cost of the project.
But we could use that money for the purchase of as long as we provide the 2 amenities in the community center, we're going to get $287,000 to apply to the community center.
It is going to be applied towards the cost of whatever you spend on the community center.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. So council, let me suggest this, and just maybe we want to think about it this way or not think about it this way. If we have 2 amenities in the community center, can we just decide on one more that's on the exterior someplace and apply apply a significant portion of the grant to the, as I say, not be specific, but apply it to the community center. And the reason I'm circling back around here is if we don't have, we're going to have to find money for AV equipment someplace, or not have it, or phase it in over the next 3 or 4 years. If we can fund that, or at least use that money toward the community center, and in that is the AV equipment, then we solve that problem right out of the chute.
How much are we talking about, Mike? That we,
124,000.
My,
David?
My question is, for the third amenity outside, Mike, is there a specific thing that's we're proposing that would do us the best on the Part F grant?
Good question.
and I have an opinion on that.
Well, that's a really good question. I typically look at my community survey a lot and look at the top 3 to 5 responses, and I use my judgment. I mean, you're investing a lot in a community center, $5 million. So it's that's a huge investment. So the other amenities, if I looked at the top 5, usually walking trails are very, very popular, whether it's paved or unpaved. I believe your splash pad ranked really high. However, that doesn't necessarily mean I need to include that in my grant application because it was the number one amenity there. I think there's justification, excuse me, to hold that off just because of your $5 million investment. So again, the community, that amenity should be backed up through the community results. Like I said, those top 3 to 5, if there's one of those amenities that speaks to you that would really complement what you already have at the park, as well as how it would complement the community center, would be appropriate in my mind.
I'd like to speak, please.
Yes, Ms. Welch.
In looking at the entirety of this park, I keep going back to what have the citizens asked for. And one question I had with those comments from our citizens is, can you break down the age group that responded? Because I think that makes a difference as well with our decision.
I don't believe I've got, Hank, do we have those broken down into age groups of spark? I don't know if we can possibly do that, but I don't know if we have that prepared for.
I'm looking through it for it right now.
It was in our survey document in the first few pages.
Well, and with that in mind, I imagine some of our older population really does want that dog park. Even if we had other areas in town for one, I think that it's such a priority that they would like to see it in this diagram. And then I think our younger population with the children would be very interested in that splash park. So those two are very high on my concern of implementing them in this plan.
Ms. Welsh, just looking at it, I know that the way the question asked, like for instance, myself, I was responding to how many people were in my household, but I was responding for everybody in the household. It does look like, though, in the age breakouts, without looking a little bit more deeper into it, that there was a fair amount of distribution from respondents as it relates to age across the spectrum. I'd say the weakest or the least amount was in the 15 and 19 category. I think Ms. Hunt is raising her hand.
Ms. Hunt?
Mr. Norris, one of the things that I've seen as I've looked through some of the past surveys and plans was basketball, either full court or half court. Could that be considered anywhere in the tennis or the pickleball, or what was that even considered at all?
That's a really good question. And we did talk about it. basketball is a popular amenity. There are some negative things that come along with basketball, as you can imagine. And for instance, the trend is not having a full basketball court, but if I did one, to just do a half court. Used to be very visible. I had a project several years ago where we had a basketball court, and it attracted some things that weren't good for the park, and so now it's a skateboard park. So you've got a very family-oriented park. Jack Warren's really special. It's got a nice community feel. Sometimes basketball courts can just bring a negative audience or a user group that may not complement that user-friendly atmosphere. Not to say that it's always happened. I'm not trying to categorize that, but that's just from previous things that we're seeing in recreation. But it could, if it was a desire to have there, I would recommend a half court. But that could be something you could do.
Thank you.
In the location, I know we're reserving the community center there where we have on the bottom, excuse me, the right side there. One thing I don't want to do, that we don't want to do, is cram too much into a park.
Sure.
You don't want to overdevelop that where it's too much going on. So that would have to be a consideration where you would put that. So.
Would you say that could possibly go where the disc golf is and take care of that age group 15 to 19, as well as, of course, adults? Yeah, I'm not sold on the disc golf as
we're
an
not
item.
showing the disc golf on this plan.
Okay. Oh, you're right. I'm looking at one I've gotten today. Excuse me. All right.
Folks, Fred, jump in here.
Yeah, I'd like to. Listen, the way I'm looking at the plan, the schematic there, the plan, we've paid the architect to design the front end of it, which includes a community center and so forth. Then we're looking at the Partif grant to help tie in the existing park and the new community center. When I look at the proposed walking trails, the dog park, and the amphitheater, those are three amenities that will tie that area in together, if you will, to develop it and make it cohesive, or that's probably not the right word, but anyhow. And I don't know exactly how that all washes out in the Partif grant, but there's three new things that we really need that are proposed there for tying things in. And then if there is an opportunity to utilize any leftover Partif money for AV equipment, then let's by all means go for that, And other than that, it's this process is getting where it's going over, and we're rehashing so much stuff. We got to focus on something here at some point in time, or we'll be talking about it next Monday night.
Dr. Sadler.
I guess I was a little lost by what you were saying there, Fred. There's, first off, there won't be any Partif money left over once it's approved. It'll have to be used for whatever you indicate it's going to be used for. These other three things, what you're saying we really need, you don't really need the three things that are outside of the community center in order to satisfy the requirements of the grant. You only need one of those three things. So anyway, you don't really need to be thinking about anything other than one amenity outside of the community center, unless you're wanting to increase the amount of money that you're prepared to spend on these things. Because it's only additive if you add those more than one thing. You're going to be adding additional money beyond whatever the $5 million is that you're planning to spend right now. I mean, that's really all I'd have to say about it. I really want to have a discussion about what the survey really means. And do we put any stock in it at all? And if we do, then how do we use the results? If we don't, then we just don't. But if we believe that there's some validity to any part of it, then which parts are valid? And then how do we want to apply those to the decision making? Because I just see, well, that's what I would like to hear from the rest of the group is, are we going to use the survey or any aspect of it? And then once we decide we're going to use it, what aspect we're going to use, then we'll have to determine, you know, why we want to use whatever it is we're saying we're going to use. When I looked at it, for instance, we've been talking about question 12 and question 13. Question 11 also asked for some input that is very similar to the input that is, in my opinion, that's requested in question 13, in terms of things that people would like to see as amenities. And as I mentioned the other night, there are 182 respondents in question 13 out of 888 people taking the survey. If you, there's some reason the rest of those people didn't comment in that section. And then in that section, it was pointed out that I guess there are about 40 or 21% of the people who mentioned dog park or something about dog recreational area or something like that. I said the other night, I'm not opposed to that, but what I wonder about is that if you look at the percentage of respondents, then it's about 40 people out of 888. If you look at the number of people responding to the other questions in the survey, in question 12, almost all of those respondents gave an answer in that particular category, whether they would have wanted additional things or not. If they wanted additional things, they didn't show up in question 13 because only 182 of those people showed up in question 13. So, you know, again, I'm right back to my original question. What do we think about the survey? Do we like it? Do we not like it? Are we going to get rid of it? If there's any part of it we think we can rely on, and what part of it is it? And then discuss what that means in terms of, you know, what our priority is for this amenity that we need to pick. Long-winded answer, sorry.
No, I think that is, and I think that we do have some concern. At least I have a little concern about the items that were selected to go into question 12. And maybe this is a good time to ask that question, Mike. The items that were selected to go into question 12, how much of our previous survey work and input from our various boards and committees went into choosing those suggested amenities in question 12?
Let's, Hank, could you pull up the survey results there?
Yes.
And let's go to question 12.
All right.
So good, thank you.
That was primarily one of the things, and you may recall this came up on your agenda. We had a short window to get the elements here on this survey, and we McGill, when I say we, McGill primarily worked with town staff to say what are some current trends that we're seeing that are very popular, as well as your tried and true type of amenities that we see typically in most parks. Looking comprehensively, we try to include as many of those on our survey tool that we use. There's a limited amount that we can allow on there, but you know, this covers a fairly broad spectrum with regard to recreation. Some new trends such as splash pad and pickleball, and then some more your traditional things such as trails and basketball. So we get a good sense of what we felt like was a good balance, and that's hopefully answer your question. Mr. Mayor.
Well, just looking at this, what it would say to us is, we probably should put in a nature or a surface trail, because that
Yeah.
clearly is the number one answer in the survey.
Right.
And so, I mean, if we do that, let me suggest something, and then you guys can kind of sort it through, because I'd like to move us into a point of decision making. What I would like to suggest we consider is the two amenities that we have in the community center, which are the multipurpose room and the arts and crafts center, and count toward the electronic equipment in those rooms as our two amenities in the community center. And then we look at the third amenity, and I'd like us to see if we would consider, and not necessarily in the current configuration, but a nature surface trail as our third amenity, and stop there in terms of what this part, assuming that's our dollars. Assuming, and if we got a little more dollars left over after we count those things out, that's fine, but stop there and say, where are we if we do this?
Mayor, just
Oh,
just as a point for perhaps for information for the council members, and Mike Norris, maybe you can help answer this. The rest of the items that are shown on the plan, they can still be depicted there, right? But just as future amenities. You're just simply trying to pick the one additional one solely for the purposes of this upcoming part of application that is coming up pretty quickly, right?
Correct.
So if you recall the site plan we showed Thursday night, it was black and green and orange. That is the quote unquote Part F site plan. The Part F authority wants to see a simple color coded site plan composed of those colors. The green is what we would include with this grant application, and the orange would be future. Existing would just be shown in black, kind of what we depicted on this. I want to make this plan to show you today very simple and straightforward, so we weren't focused on why are you proposing this and not that. So we would come to what we're going to show. But correct. Now, and even those future amenities, they're future. They can, and there can be other amenities on the say, hey, you know what? Why didn't we think of this? So let's throw in a Gaga pit or maybe. So you're not locked into those future amenities. I want to make sure you're clear with that, and the location as well.
Yeah.
Council, what do you think about that suggestion?
I've got a comment, Mike.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Foster.
So I am in full agreement with your recommendation, and I would add one piece. So if you look at the nature trails and you tie it to Kenton's question about, do we want to give due to the survey? Well, if we say we want to, then to your point, that's the number one item. What I also like about that item is it came from the Louisville Beautification Committee, is that was an important component for them when asked about what should happen at Jack Warren Park as it relates to the community center. Both they and the stakeholder group, as I recall, said that. When you look at our parks and, our Greenway pedestrian plan, when you've looked at every survey, when you've looked at all of our comprehensive plans, one of the top items is always trails, sidewalks, and trails. So to me, that's a low risk, low hanging fruit sort of decision. If we wanted to add something to that, it would make sense to me to consider the child's nature play area. Again, these are things that are just reinforcing what's already there, and then knowing that we have a master park and rec plan that we're putting an RFP together with the comp plan right around the corner. We can look at the totality of our recreational needs, looking back at this survey and finding out what do we want to do as a town-wide recreating perspective. So I like what you suggested, Mike. I would suggest those, at least that one item, if not those two items, for our decision.
Ms. Hunt.
Mayor, do you need a motion to move this forward?
Yeah, I guess, well, let me make the motion.
Okay.
Would you like to make the motion?
No, you go ahead. I'm ready for a second.
What I'd like to advance in our Part F application is that looking at this diagram now, we show 2 green amenities in the community center as new amenities. And we'll show the arts and crafts room, we'll show the multipurpose room. And then we show a green line, which will be our nature trail, whatever we call it. But I would like for us to consider, as Fred pointed and Jean Maria pointed out, I would like us to consider some reconfiguration of that so that it's a little more circular in nature, so you don't have to turn around and walk back the opposite direction to complete the trail. That would be my motion. And actually, the additional part of that is to show additional amenities on here in future years, however, subject to the outcome of our master plan of recreational facilities.
Yeah.
That's a long motion.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay, good.
So for discussion purposes for that motion, so would you be willing to consider adding the child's natural play area as part of that?
Well, let's do some quick math real quick. Let's
For the 30, it's 103 total for the two.
Yeah, let's suspend the motion just for a second. So we're looking at the nature trail is 73,
Mhm.
and I suspect it'll probably be closer to 80 when we get it over with. And then we have the, Jean Marie, you're talking about the natural play area.
Yeah, it's 30,000 listed on the McGill.
Okay, so that puts us at 110.
And that's more of an allowance there. I would like to make sure, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
Sure.
You have some flexibility with the natural play area.
Now, Mike, real quick question for Mr. Norris. You got down there site development. We're going to have additional costs like grading work and for this area?
The natural play area, or excuse me, the nature trail, it factored in site development costs based on some research
Okay.
that received for this.
All right.
So if you take the natural play area and the nature trail, you're at a total of $235,000, or we're a total of $110,000. If we throw the proposed AV system in there for the 2 amenities in the community center, that's 125. We're now at 235. So we have some room to play with if we want to look at another proposed amenity.
The community garden.
I'm confused, Mayor.
Okay.
How do you arrive at that? So are you saying that we're going to spend money out? 5.2 million is the cost of the community center. I assumed we were trying to stay close to that cost for the community center, and that we're only now trying to take advantage of some grant money that might be available through part of. And by doing that, what you do is reduce the outflow of funds from the town for the community center, because those 2 amenities that are mentioned within can account for, some of that money toward the community center. Sure. We could also use some of that money, for AV or whatever. But I personally wouldn't be looking at it as then leaving additional money left over to go outside and find something else to build, because then you're increasing the overall cost.
The doctor's correct. You're not. The only reason I would include the natural play area is to add that extra little carrot there. Hey, everybody else has got 3 amenities. We've got 4. So it might make your grant application a little more attractive. But if you start adding more onto, you can go ahead and add that outside of the grant because you're not getting any match money for it, because you're expending all that towards the community center.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that clarification. I wasn't proposing to add additional money. I was saying that if we're going to ask for $350,000, we have only allocated $235,000 with our current request.
No, because the remainder, your land match is 387,000, right?
Right.
You're going to get the 100,000 for the 73 for the nature trail and the 30 or so for the natural area. That's an additional 100,000. The rest of it you put toward the cost of the community center.
Gotcha. Okay, so what you're saying is then use the Part F grant to offset the cost of building the multipurpose room and the arts and crafts area.
Exactly.
I'm good with that. That's fine with me too.
So amend the motion maybe.
Okay, so let me go back and restate the motion. Mrs. Hunt, were you the second on that?
No, Jane was.
Ms. Welch, will you allow me to go back and restate the motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the motion is that we go ahead and approve the 2 new amenities in the community center, the multipurpose room and the arts and crafts room with the appropriate equipment. And we add as our 3rd amenity, the nature trail with some reconfiguration and the natural playground.
Yes, and that includes the AV cost, correct?
We would absorb, yeah, like as Dr. Sadler said, we'll absorb some of that out of the $378 match.
Okay.
Ms. Welch, will you accept that as your second now?
Yes.
Very good. Any further discussion? Very good. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much, everybody. That was really, really helpful. The only other question I would ask in developing a site plan, I'm a little weak in the knees about showing a dog park in this particular drawing. I think once you put it out there and the public sees that you're proposing a dog park right in the middle of Jack Warren Park, that's where they're going to ask. That's what they're going to expect it to be. So, is there objection to not showing the dog park in that location? Not saying we won't do it, but just saying that if we show it on the master plan, folks are going to expect it to be there.
Do we need to keep showing proposed future expansion or facility or whatever on the site plan?
Yes, sir.
I think, in my opinion, this is just me as a consultant talking, but I always like to show a future phase on a Part F grant application, because they, it's just that, hey, we've got more we want to do. So it's always, in my opinion, I would show future amenities there. Not saying to put the dog park there. That's your call, but I do think it's nice to have the other amenities.
Thoughts on the dog park showing on the current site plan?
Mike, I'm gonna,
Yeah,
ahead.
Melissa?
Fred, go ahead. I'll defer to you. You were.
That wasn't exactly what I was talking about, Mike. The site plan keeps showing out in front of the community center proposed development. I don't know that that's ever been agreed upon by this council, and I know that with the last council there was a lot of discussion over that.
Well, I'm not.
I think,
Reserved for future development. Do
Mike,
we need to keep showing that on there
Mike,
if we're not going to show the dog park?
can I make a comment here about that? Mike, can you talk about our conversation on that portion of that corner?
Okay. So anytime you use this type of grant application is almost, although the property's donated, the way the grant and the way Part F works, it's almost like you're purchasing property. Anytime you purchase property through Part F, I mentioned amenities. Amenities have to be there for a minimum of 25 years. However, land is for perpetuity. So this property we're shown here has to remain town property and for public use. So reserved for future development would be, for instance, future park development. It has to be a park and remain a park for public use. Now, there may be support facilities such as, well, if I needed a maintenance area for this facility, but it has to be related to the park. I just want to make sure everybody understood that commitment level there.
Yeah, Fred, I'm not sure where your objection to say reserve for future development.
Probably, if I could add something, maybe a clarification, maybe reserved for future park development.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that satisfied. Mr. Franklin, will you elaborate just a bit?
Well, Mike, you know as well as I do, this goes back to the discussion about the why in the last council.
Right.
That's where this discussion goes back to.
Right.
And when they were not included in this, that was not set aside for future development, except for your talks with the Y.
I'm sorry, Fred, I'm not following you.
Fred, what we're talking about in this proposal is that that area in the corner, since it's being contributed and it's treated like a purchase for Part F, the entire land has to be remaining in I guess, possession of the town, and it has to be dedicated for park amenities.
All right.
So in placing that down there, it was intended to be, while there wasn't a future master plan idea for this corner, we were reserving this for future park amenities not foreseen in this site plan.
All right. I'll buy that, I guess.
Yeah.
But Hank, you were suggesting maybe changing that to say reserved for future park development? Is
Yes.
that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
That'd be fine.
So
But back to the doggy park.
yeah, I was going to get back there too, Mayor. I'd like to keep it off of the site plan.
Anybody else?
I'm fine with it off-site plan as well. I did have another question though, whenever we get done with this item.
Everybody okay taking the dog park off and not saying we're not going to do it, but just removing it from this particular future proposed amenity?
I can be okay either way.
Great.
I would like to see that. I'd like to see it stay. I mean, if we're leaving the splash park, that's a $300,000 item. And, you know, people will expect that when they see it. I think the dog park is minor compared to that. I'd like to keep the dog park.
So Jane, one of the things that my reasoning for removing it, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, go ahead, please.
One of the reasons that I was advocating for removing it is because we do have other parcels of land that I feel would be suited for a standalone dog park. And kind of to Mayor's point, I believe, is that if we include it on this site plan, then when this is rolled out, it may lend the public to think that we are going to place that dog park in the future on that particular property. Was kind of my thoughts, and I may be off on kind of my reasoning behind that, but I think we have in our total master plan that we are getting ready to do the RFP for, I think that that's something they could possibly consider the other parcels of land that may be more appropriate for a standalone 1 acre dog park or 4 acre dog park or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
That's
You were on the same page on that one, yeah.
Mhm. I think the only problem with that is that puts it all pretty much in the future, I think, in the public's mind. And, you know, unless you speak specifically to those areas, they're going to think, well, that's not going to happen.
well, I mean, it's not going to.
Whoever mentioned that the next year you may be doing a system-wide recreation plan.
Right.
And I think that's a great opportunity to do a more robust meetings, to do a more robust community survey, and as well as look at individual town-owned properties that would maybe say, let's don't put our stake in the ground on. I would agree with putting it on here if we're not convinced it needs to be there, just because that I think there likely is a need, but it may give folks a sense that, hey, it's going to go here when actually we may be looking at some other sites that could provide that, but not to say that it's not important. But again, I've seen this happen before where say, hey, we said we adopted this plan, it had a dog park here, why haven't we done that? Versus a splash pad, which probably makes, you know, you're not probably going to have a standalone splash pad. It probably needs to belong in a park.
So Mike Norris, that is. So you said earlier, because for me, I'm just focused on what on this site plan is going to help forward and provide some enhanced success for us to possibly get the grant. Are you saying that by having the dog park there, it will or will not enhance our grant application?
What's going to enhance your application is what you are proposing.
Right. That's
So
what-
I believe your nature trail gives you a third amenity, and I believe that natural play area adds although a small cost of fourth amenity, that adds another user group there and another unique type of amenity that I think would be a good application.
Right. So this site plan is specific to the Part F application. What I'm hearing the heartburn, the concern is being is if to the greater community, for those of you who are watching, that might get attached to what it shows, the site plan shows, that's not necessarily what we're saying. Is that correct, council? That we're going to be looking at these amenities and the appropriate spots elsewhere. So like I said, if you're saying, Mike Norris, that we can go either way, I'll defer to the group. I can go either way.
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying that I do not feel like a dog park is at the top of our list. I feel very strongly that a dog park is. However, I feel like it's more appropriate for it to be in the overall master plan that we're getting ready to work on, and that we consider other site locations. But no, I'm not by any means saying that I don't feel like that's something that we need to work on as a council collectively.
Hank, can you flash up everybody's picture?
Yes.
Very good. So maybe by show of hands, how many of you are okay leaving the dog park off this particular drawing with the understanding that we're going to incorporate that in consideration of that in the overall Parks and Recreation plan that we do for the town?
I can do that.
Just raise your hands. Okay. Any opposed? Mrs. Welch is opposed. Okay, so very good. So it's 6 to 1.
Mr.
That
Franklin.
And Mr. Franklin,
I'm
and-
sorry,
and-
I missed
and
you.
David.
Okay, you're
I have
being
a
backlit. You have
question.
this heavenly glow on yourself. Okay, so Mr. Franklin and Mrs. Welch. Anybody else?
I just have a question.
Yes, sir, David.
Right now, the park is off limits to dogs. Could we possibly, in the lieu of, I know we're looking at doing a dog park possibly elsewhere where I could see it being more conducive. Could we not incorporate the dogs on a leash on the natural trails and just put up some baggy things? We could still keep them off the main walkway that's in place now, but if we're going to have the community center and the natural trails, to me, we could just incorporate letting owners walk their dogs there as a attempt to include everybody in one place. And then later, when funds are available, we build an outstanding.
Yeah, David, I think that's a great point. I think we might want to flush that back through the Parks and Rec Committee and let them weigh in on it a little bit too, because that kind of is, as you know, it's a very important committee that we have. You chaired it, and see if we can't bring that back in a fashion as you're discussing.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to be at this point, I believe 5-2 in favor of leaving the location of the dog park off this current rendering. Great. Thank you, everybody. Hank, what else do you need from us on this?
I need for you guys to consider and
Dr. Sadler?
The only other thing, the question that I had with regard to these two amenities that are going to be included is somehow getting in front of the commission, the authority folks who are going to make the decision about this, a description of what these areas really are, because they may not. I mean, it's been a long time since I've been on the authority, but you know, they're going. My guess is there's still people there who see a natural play area and a playground, may think, well, how are they so different, and see a walking trail, hard surface or not, and then natural, and say, how are these different? So there needs to just be, at least in my opinion, I think there ought to be a way of distinguishing those from what currently exists so that there's no confusion on the part of the authority members.
So, Mr. Norris, your charge then is to romance the language so that it makes these sound like some very spectacular new amenities that we're offering.
Absolutely, and we would where we can show graphic representations of of those and obviously the benefit and the narrative of why that's needed.
Great. Very
Right.
good.
Now, I hate to say this, but we're going to need another meeting. Special call meeting, probably in 48 hours or as quick as Ms. Walker can put one together for us. What we'll need to do is that we do have representatives of Recreation Resources, and they are willing to take a look at our draft application, give us feedback on this so that we can have the opportunity to make sure that we've got all the boxes checked appropriately and make corrections by June 1st. What we'll need to do is we get back to the CIP, or the Capital Improvements Program, that I talked about last meeting in regards to Jack Warren Park. That needs to be put before the board and approved based on the cost considerations that we've been through this evening. And we also need to do facts and assurances, which also has the same dollar figures, which is our commitment to the local match dollars itself. And then probably what we'll end up doing is have the council sign off in the affirmative that they are in favor of applying for the application, and then having that all put together by McGill with staff, getting that to Recreation Resources, having them the ability to give us their feedback and opportunity to redirect before June 1st. Did I capture that okay, Mike Norris?
One other thing that we'll want to provide to you in the next 48 hours, we're going to update our site plan, our master plan document. So we prepared a document that goes through a variety of things, from site inventory to needs assessment to our proposals. So based on our discussions today, we're going to update that, as well as update the cost estimates for now that we've decided on what is going to be included in this Part F grant application. We'll update that so you'll have a capital improvements plan in front of you that will be, and these will be presented for adoption, which is required for the Part F grant application.
So Hank, are you suggesting we go ahead and advertise the meeting 48 hours from now?
Yes, to whatever timetable would be the first available day. Joyce probably can tell us what day that's going to be.
Just not tomorrow.
Yeah. You're muted, Joyce.
I'm sorry. Do you think you could have, well, I wouldn't say Wednesday because we don't know how fast we can get everything back out. I would probably have to put it out tomorrow morning. So I would go with Thursday.
How is
Very
that
good.
for everyone else?
And
I
that-
have a problem with Thursday. My husband's having some major surgery Thursday morning, which means if we have it again at 6 o'clock, it will probably work, but a little anxious about Thursday.
Jane, I'll bring the laptop to the hospital room and he's doing that outpatient, isn't he?
Okay.
We can celebrate John's survey with a town council meeting. I think really appreciate that.
All right.
So-
It'll probably work for me, but if it has to be Thursday.
Dr. Sadler?
So I noticed when the results of the survey were pulled up just a few minutes ago that the number of respondents has now increased. It's open until May 1st, is that right? Or are we continuing to?
It's available and open for people to answer.
Okay, so it just keeps updating. All right.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so Ms. Walker, you do the appropriate announcement for 6 o'clock Thursday.
Mhm.
Single item considered, not a long briefing, not a long meeting.
And I will get with you and Hank to get the exact wording that we should put out with it.
So Fred, I think I saw your hand. You're just waving, okay. Okay, very
Hey,
good.
Mike, so we need to make ourselves available 6 p.m. on Thursday, is that correct?
For a
That's
very
correct.
short meeting, yes. Okay, everybody good with that?
Yes.
Excellent. Hank, I think that covers everything under number 2, our Part F discussion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Orell, Mr. Manager, we're now at our budget review.
Hey,
Okay.
Mike.
I'm sorry,
Yo,
Fred.
Mike,
Yes.
Look, I'm probably gonna leave the meeting here and go get back on house power and turn this generator off, okay? So I'll
Okay.
join you guys shortly again. Hank, be on the lookout for me when I come back in. I'm gonna go ahead and hit leave meeting just for momentarily.
Got it.
All right.
Mr. Norris is going to say bye to us.
Bye,
Thank
Mike.
you, Mike Norris.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye, Mr. Norris.
Thank you.
Hey, Mayor,
That's fine. Yes,
can we take a,
of course.
since we've lost Fred, can we take a stand-up break?
Want to take 5 minutes?
That, if
Does that-
everybody.
Does that suffice?
That'd be great.
Yes.
Great. 5 minutes?
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to take a short break. Don't leave because there's much more exciting programming to come, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up on a very exciting time for the town, and this is when we do begin the annual budget review for all the services and amenities and all of the other things that are part of the town of Louisville. This evening, we're going to begin talking about our general fund and our revenues and expenditures. We're anticipating several nights to be going through budget items. Each council member has an opportunity to talk about each one. We'll ask questions of our finance director and our manager. And at the conclusion of this process, we will have a final budget for us to have a public hearing on, and we hope you'll participate in that public hearing. But we are probably 3 or 4 meetings away, 3 meetings anyway, away from having that finalized budget. We do have to approve it no later than June 30th. So that it is in effect for our new budget year, which is July 1. With that, Hank, who's going to lead, you or Pam?
I'm going to turn this one over to Pam, and she's going to walk us through the general fund revenues to begin with.
Okay, I apologize up front. I'm using my iPad, so I can only see 9 faces. So that means I can't see Fred or Jean Marie. So if anybody has any questions, just kind of shout out.
Raise your hand because I can see everybody. And I'll keep an eye open.
Okay. All right. Has everybody got their budget booklet?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay. So let's start with page 1. Okay, first of all, we're going to talk about general fund revenues, and the first 3 pages actually list each revenue line item that we have in the general fund. The first 2 columns have the general ledger account number and the description of the revenue source. The next 2 columns give the actual and budget numbers for the past fiscal year, 2018, 2019. And the next column gives the budget for the year that we are in right now, our current budget year for 2019, 2020. And then the next column next to that has what we think are estimated revenues, or how they're going to come in for the rest of this fiscal year for 1920. We spend just as much time on those numbers as we do on the next year's budget numbers because of 2 reasons. One, at this point in the fiscal year, we want to make sure that we are still operating within the budget. And 2, sometimes we use this estimated number for the current year as a jumping off point for actually budgeting the next year's numbers as well. And then the very last column where it says manager recommended, that is the budget number that we are proposing for those revenue sources for 2020, 2021. Okay, let's actually start digging into some of those revenues. If you'll turn to page 4.
Now, I have a question or 2 on page 1, please.
Okay.
Yes. Now the projection is, and the fiscal year ends July. Is that correct?
June 30th.
June 30th. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm looking, for example, under beer and wine and what the estimation is. And I know I've read more than once with the coronavirus, they have said already beer and wine sales have increased up to 75%.
Okay.
So I don't think that number will be reflected as you thought when this was, put together.
Okay,
So
Jen,
that was, go ahead.
Well, we're going to talk about that particular line item in a little bit.
Oh, all right. So I'm still
getting
used to how then this is going to be, because, I didn't want to leave any page that I had a question for. So bear with me.
Okay.
Yeah, one quick question on our ad valorem. We are looking at actually a a manager recommended ad valorem revenue less than what we're projecting for the end of the year.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and dig into property taxes then. If you'll
Yeah.
turn to page 4.
Let's go to page 4, okay?
She's wanting to go to page 4.
Everybody, I promise everybody, we'll get it. We'll touch on all of these line items.
Okay.
Especially because some of you are new, I kind of want to explain what some of the line items are. Mayor, did you disappear?
He's getting page 4.
Oh, okay.
He's gone to pay his taxes.
Okay.
I think I'm back.
There he is.
Oh, Fred's back too. Good.
Okay. All right, everybody's on page 4. First, let's talk about the ad valorem revenue or the property tax. Just to let you know how we budget for that. Forsyth County, every year about this time, they give us preliminary estimates of what our valuation will be. We get a preliminary estimate on March 1st, another one on April 1st, and then we'll get another one on May 1st. So the latest estimate we have that we received on April 1st gives us an estimated valuation of approximately $1,426,000. Okay, now if you look at the next bullet point, that does give us an increase in our valuation, if that holds up, of approximately $22,861,000. That is a 1.6% increase. The budget does maintain a tax rate of 17.7 cents per $100 evaluation. And when we budget for ad valorem, we use a collection rate of 97%. Now that is considerably lower than what our actual collection rate generally comes in at. If you look at last year, our collection rate was 99.69%. So we do have a very good collection rate. Using all of those assumptions, that does give us a budgeted ad valorem for the next fiscal year of $2,448,605. That is an increase of $39,255. Okay. I think, Mayor, your question was, why is that so much lower than what we estimate our current
Right.
ad valorem? And a lot of it is the collection rate we use. We use 97%. That is conservative. And keep in mind that our valuation is still an estimate.
With as many new homes as we have under construction,
Yeah.
did we even begin to think about calculating the potential of new revenue that's going to be? I know we're using the county's projections, but they really are not taking into account all of the development that we have going on.
Right.
Hank, would you like to address that?
You're on mute.
You know, with things like they are and not knowing the growth rate in those, we were taking the most conservative approach to it, not knowing exactly what we're going to get, but hoping that we are going to get something out of it to not hedge our bets on something that we don't absolutely know is going to happen at a particular rate, but stay as close to the mark for the numbers that we've got, and then anything we get above that's going to help us out.
How much are we talking about coming online? I mean, how many houses are we talking about coming online during that period of time?
I think if, I don't know that it's a tremendous amount. I mean, it is given what we've experienced over the last few years. I think we're probably talking around 400 at best possible.
Higher than that, yep. So Pam, it's Jean Marie question. What are the basics of the Forsyth County assumptions when they're providing these preliminary estimates? You don't need to go into the weeds, but just sort of at a high level, what are the key assumptions?
Well, I think a lot of it plays off a prior year. And the reason they're still estimates, a lot of especially businesses have not filed their property tax listings yet. And they're still just crunching the numbers. And so I'll be honest with you, Jean Marie, I don't really know the ins and outs of how they come up with those numbers.
Okay.
I mean, do we know the average, what these houses are, these 400 or plus houses? Jean, anybody know what we're looking at? The average sale price or what these things are coming out at?
I just assume 3 to 4.
300 to 400,000. Okay.
I think that's
I mean,
pretty close.
the planning
Somebody
board
more
can't ask those kinds of questions, you know,
Sure.
when we're approving, but
Sure.
from what I just saw with some of the advertising as a resident.
Sure. Okay.
So I guess let us surmise then it's safe to say that this ad valorem budget revenue projection could be quite a bit lower than our actual receipts if the development occurs as it's occurring and we begin to take a look at that over the next year.
That's true.
Okay, thank you. It's going to have an impact on on some of our decisions we're going to have to make here in a little bit, but let's just keep in mind that that's a number we may want to come back to.
Is it just for, is it much different year over year in terms of growth over the last few years? Has it been about the same rate of growth in terms of new homes in the town?
Stacy, you can answer that, I believe.
Before I was employed by the town, we had quite a few approved lots, but with recession, downturn in the market and everything, it's finally starting to come back. I'm not really sure what this COVID-19 will do to that market and what it has currently done to the market, but we have about 530, 550 approved lots in Louisville for the past couple of years. I know some of those developments, like Belgrove, for instance, Conrad Farm, they are getting ready to start on phase 2. A lot of those are being built out. But then, you know, it just kind of depends. We have some that have been approved, you know, that could be anywhere from 100 to 150 of those lots that don't have homes in them yet. They're still building roads. So, I mean, it just kind of varies from development to development, but we have seen an increase simply because of the turn in the market and people are developing again. So.
Okay.
Along those lines, Stacy, while you're open for questions, is there an average period of time from when they go through and they're approved to when things, I mean, have we ever tracked like when they're approved and then when it actually starts selling out on the lots or coming onto our property taxes? Do we know if there's that time period? Do we have that data?
I don't know. I know some developers are very fast. They get a plan approved, they get roads on the ground, and they get it recorded and they start building houses right away. But then you have some that, I know we have one that has changed hands a couple times. Developers have changed hands. That kind of slows the process. So on average, I would say that, you know, most of them are pretty willing to go ahead and start that, building those houses. But then again, you have some that aren't quite as lucky, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Fred.
Yeah, I would submit that as far as ad valorem, the one most important thing that will affect us during the next fiscal year coming online is Pilgrim Crossing, because of the apartments there are going to be collectively taken at a large ticket item, if you will, when it comes to property tax, whether they have them leased or not. Whereas, you know, the Conrad Farms and the other developments are going to be one house at a time.
And
so I guess just summarizing, I think we can anticipate that maybe this number is a little low.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Moving on.
Any other questions? Okay. If you look at the table on that same page, it's just a reproduction of the previous schedules, pages 1 through 3. You see the ad valorem that we budgeted of $2,448,605, and then related to that, we budgeted penalties and interest related to those collections of $4,000.
Pam, I'm sorry, you were just where on back? You went back to page 1?
No, I was on page. I'm still on page 4.
On 4. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's turn to page 5. Okay, now let's talk about the local sales tax revenue. This is the town's second largest revenue source, and it is the one that most closely does fluctuate with the health of the economy. If you look at our collections for the first 7 months of this fiscal year, July 2019 through January 2020, we are up 6.4% over the same 7 months in the prior year because the economy was going like gangbusters. However, with COVID-19, economists, according to the League of Municipalities, where we do get a lot of our information, they are predicting a sharp economic decline in the last quarter of this fiscal year, April through June of 2020. This wave of unemployment caused by all the business closures and the social distancing, they think that once the social distancing ends and things get back to normal, there will probably still be one more quarter of negative growth. And unfortunately, that does meet the definition of a recession, which is defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth in the GDP. There are lots of unknowns whenever we prepare this budget. First of all, how long will the stay-at-home orders last? If the longer they stay in effect, that means that it's possible the steepest decline in the economic decline will be at its steepest at the beginning of our next fiscal year. This has made it very difficult to budget for sales tax revenue. There are a few things working in our favor. First of all, our local sales tax does apply to grocery food. So to the extent that people aren't eating out as much, but doing more food prep at home, we do get to take advantage of that particular tax on grocery items. Another thing working in our favor that's still relatively new, North Carolina is able to tax online purchases now. Some of you may be familiar with the U.S. Supreme Court case. It was South Dakota versus Wayfair. That did give states the authority to require online retailers without a physical presence in a state to collect and remit sales tax to that state. So that will work in our favor as well. All of that said, to help us budget for sales tax this next fiscal year, we look to the North Carolina League of Municipalities. They have I guess it's a panel of researchers that does help us with our projections. And if you flip to page 6, they have developed 3 different scenarios of how our sales tax revenue could fall out in this current fiscal year and the next fiscal year. They've labeled those 3 scenarios most conservative, severe, or moderate. And in the very first column there, you see the year-end growth for the current fiscal year. Basically, the most conservative says that our current year sales tax revenues could decline by 0.5 percentage point. And then further over on the third column, you see that year-end growth for next fiscal year could decline even further by 3.2%. That is the most conservative estimate that they are giving out right now, how sales tax revenues might fall out in the next fiscal year because of COVID-19. We have decided to take that conservative stance when budgeting for sales tax revenues. And so we have budgeted that this current fiscal year that we're in right now will end, the sales tax collections will end 0.5 percentage point down from the prior fiscal year, 2018-19, and that further we will have a decline even further of 3.2% in this next fiscal year. Now, if you look at the table just below, we have 5 different line items for sales tax revenue in our general ledger. They're different articles. Article 39 tax or sales tax is the 1% tax that you pay whenever you go to the store. The Article 40 is a 0.5% sales tax, and Article 42 is a 0.5% sales tax as well. The hold harmless replaces Article 44. I'm not as familiar with that. I believe that dates back to around 2007. When there used to be an Article 44 sales tax, and that was done away with. But this particular revenue we received for this line item kind of makes us whole for that loss. So you see in total that if you look back at 2018-19, our sales tax revenues were $833,100. And then in 2019-2020, we're estimating that we're going to finish this year at $828,950. And then, like I said, we've instituted a 3.2% decline in the next fiscal year of $802,400.
Any questions on sales tax? Very good. Moving on.
All right.
Jane's concerned about the beer and wine. Here we are.
Not quite. Yeah, that's right. Here we are, Jane.
Okay. And real quick, Pam, if you don't mind, would you refresh what is the harmless sales tax? Would you explain that again?
Like I said, it dates back to 2007, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know the history of that. If you look in the very back of this booklet on page 55, there is a memo back there that the league puts out that describes a lot of these revenues, and it goes into the hold harmless discussion in more detail. So Jane, I'm going to refer you to that, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, with time being.
Ma'am, I can speak a little bit to that.
Okay. Hank?
I can speak a little bit to that in general terms. There may be 2 or 3 different hold harmless types of sales tax involved with it. But in general, what that happens is that at some point in the past, local governments, in our case, were enjoying a sales tax. And for whatever reason, the General Assembly decided to eliminate that sales tax. And the hold harmless part of it was that the General Assembly of the state of North Carolina, in the most generalist terms, were going to make payments to the localities in place of those sales tax that had been removed from the people who, I guess, paid those at the register. And a lot of times you'll see those hold harmless will have sunset provisions where they won't last forever. So there are hold harmless sales or hold harmless payments that probably have been in the past and have long since expired, and some that are currently in force and may have expiration dates in the future. Okay.
Doesn't make a lot of sense, but I understand your explanation.
Well, they don't always, in my recollection, they don't always hold you harmless either. Because that happened when we went from per capita to ad valorem distribution a number of years ago as well.
Well, we also had a situation where Forsyth County phased out their revenue sharing of sales tax with us over about 4 years. So there's been shifts in the sales taxes, but Jane has a good description on page 56 down the left-hand column about cities being held hold harmless.
And Mike, I'll reiterate that this 2007 deal was when the county commissioner started with, there was a change in the way it was appropriated to municipalities in the county, and the commissioner started to hold it all for himself, and the legislature come back later and made us hold harmless, and give us back what we had lost.
I think that's pretty good capitalization.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Orell.
Okay. Now, sales tax was one of those state shared revenues. That means that the state collects the revenue and then they pass it on to the municipalities and counties. The next few revenue sources that we talk about are other state shared revenues. The next one is the alcoholic beverages tax revenue, or beer and wine tax. The alcoholic beverages tax, this is an excise tax paid by the producers of alcohol based on their sales of alcohol in North Carolina. A portion of the tax that's collected is distributed by the North Carolina Department of Revenue to municipalities and counties based on the population of the cities and the unincorporated areas of the counties. And I've listed the tax rates there. On sale of beer, the tax is 61.71 cents per gallon. On the sale of unfortified wine, it's 26.34 cents per liter. And on the sale of fortified wine, it's 29.34 cents per liter. Now, the towns and counties only receive one distribution per year, and it usually comes in May. So we haven't even received our distribution for the current fiscal year. Now, Jane, this is what you were talking about. According to the North Carolina Department of Revenue, they do say that current year sales are trending only slightly higher than last year. That number may be a little dated with COVID-19, but the League of Municipalities is only predicting a 0.5% increase in current year collections over 2018-19. So we've gone with that assumption as well. And then, like you said, even though alcohol sales are somewhat recession-proof, the league is predicting no growth in this sales in this tax item for the next fiscal year. So if you look at the table below, you see that in 2018-19, our collection was $57,173. So we've gone with a 0.5% increase in the current year. So you see our estimated for 2019-20, our current year is $57,460, and we're holding flat with that in the next fiscal year at $57,460. So we're going with the league's recommendation on that particular revenue source.
So you'll probably see the increase really next year's budget.
Jane, we can do our part if you want to.
Yeah, I'll need to tell my husband that he's going more than 0.5% in his increase. But all right, thank you.
All right. If you'll turn to page 8, the next revenue source is another state shared revenue, and this is a sales tax on electricity sales. A 7% general sales tax is levied on the sale of electricity, and of the amount collected, 44% is allocated to cities and towns. Rather than the economy, there are other factors that do influence the sales tax collected on electricity. It could be policy changes, energy prices, the weather is very important, and any changing technologies. We did again look to the League of Municipalities on predictions for the current year and next fiscal year. The League is predicting that current year collections will only be 1.7% higher than those of 2018-19. And the League is further predicting that in the next fiscal year, collections will only grow by 1%. So we did follow that guidance from the League with those projections. So you can see that for electricity sales tax in 18-19, our collections were $443,635. Taking into account the projected 1.7% increase in the current fiscal year, we're predicting that current year collections will come in at $451,180. And so we're predicting next fiscal year for our budget only a 1% increase at $455,690. So any collections on electricity, any questions on electricity sales tax?
This is Jean Marie, Pam. I'm assuming when you say we're looking to the League, that League had their recommendations, and any recommendations you're referencing from the League are coming post-COVID.
Exactly. Yes, the memo came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the next revenue source is a sales tax on piped natural gas. A 7% general sales tax is levied on the sale of piped natural gas, and of the amount collected, only 20% is allocated to cities and towns. The factors that drive this revenue source are mostly price and consumption, driven by the weather, of course. Due to the decrease in heating degree days, basically we had a warm winter, the League is predicting a 10% decline in our current fiscal year collections. Of course, weather patterns are highly unpredictable, and that makes this predicting this revenue source very difficult. But based on trends, the League is predicting that the next budget year will see a 1.5% decline over the current year. So sales tax collections on piped natural gas in 2018-19 were $18,403. We took into account the predicted 10% decline to estimate this year at $16,560. And so then we're predicting our budget for next year with a 1.5% decline of $16,310.
Question, comment, like to pop in.
Mr. Franklin.
Yeah, this is one that not for this current budget. I think this number is great and we should stick with it. But this is one area that we will have growth in going forward because Conrad Farm is all going to be piped natural gas. They laid it into the development and everything. So there's a number of houses coming on to this in the future and everything.
Is this a state-derived? I asked a question actually about the electricity. Is this a state-derived revenue or is it a local derived revenue? In other words, when I pay my electric bill, do I pay a 7% tax on that that then comes directly back to the town, or does that go to the state and then they split it up among all the municipalities?
No, in fact, I'm going to again refer you to the memo in the back that explains it very well. But if the amount that we get for electricity and the pipe natural gas is really tied to the calculation whenever it was a franchise tax. So if our population increases here or the consumption increases in Louisville, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to benefit from that. The state as a whole benefits, but we are not going to benefit individually. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they just divvy up whatever they get across all the municipalities based on some formula they use.
Yeah, and it is tied to, when it used to be a franchise tax and not a sales tax, whatever that last quarter distribution was for the franchise tax, that's the number that they used to allocate pro rata to every municipality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's how it works for electricity and the pipe natural gas.
Thanks, Pam, for the explanation.
Okay. Okay, if everybody will turn to page 9, the next state shared revenue that we have is a sales tax on telecommunications. This is an 8% sales tax levied on the gross receipts of telephone companies. And of this amount, the Department of Revenue must distribute 18.7% minus this arbitrary number, $2,620,948. And don't ask me where that comes from, but it's just I'm sure it's a number that means something to them, but anyway. Now for towns that were incorporated on or before July 1st, 2001, the distribution of this revenue is based on each municipality's past share of the old telephone franchise tax. There has been a steady decline in this revenue source since 2008, partly due to customers going solely with mobile phones and not using landline phone service anymore. The CDC, or Center for Disease Control, conducted a survey, and it showed that 1/2 of American homes have only wireless phones, and more than 76% of adults aged 25 to 34 live in wireless-only households. Because of all this, the league is predicting a 7.5% decline in this revenue source in our current fiscal year, and a further decline of 9.2% in our upcoming budget year. So accordingly, we have followed that guidance. If you look at the table, you see that our actual revenue in 18-19 for this revenue source was $37,287. And then we applied the 7.5% decline in our current fiscal year to come to $34,490, and then a further 9.2% decline in our upcoming budget year to come to a budgeted number of $31,320. All right, any questions about that one?
Do they, regarding telecommunications, and what happens with all the revenues, do you know, that they get from cell phone usage? Because there are taxes on those as well.
I'm not sure who's getting those. I'm not familiar with that, Dr. Sadler. Okay, the next revenue source is a sales tax on video programming. Again, there's been an overall decline in this revenue source as well. A lot of people are not using cable TV anymore. Instead, they're using streaming services. So this is really cut into our revenue source here. But the league does think that this is leveling off. So they're predicting a 1% increase in the current fiscal year in our collections and only a 1.7% decline in the upcoming budget year. So our video programming sales tax collections in 18-19 came in at $139,684. And then we applied the 1% increase in our current year collections to come to $141,080. And then we applied a 1.7% decline in the upcoming budget year. So we're budgeting $138,680. Okay, any questions about those particular sales tax items?
I don't see any. Moving on.
Okay, the next, if you'll turn to page 10, this is also a state shared revenue. It's solid waste disposal tax revenue. The state levies a $2 per ton tipping tax on municipal solid waste and construction and demolition debris that is deposited in a landfill in the state or transferred at a transfer station for disposal outside the state. Municipalities and counties receive 18.75% of this tax, with the revenue distributed on a per capita basis. The funds that we get from this are restricted to solid waste management programs and services. During the 2008 recession, the generation of solid waste decreased primarily in the construction industry. So it appears that the health of the construction sector does seem to be a contributing factor to solid waste. Housing starts were up in North Carolina in January, 21% over the prior year. However, this is likely to slow with COVID-19. With the predicted economic decline due to COVID-19, the league is predicting there will be a 3.2% decline in our current collections, and they are further projecting a 1% increase in the next budget year. So for the disposal tax distribution, the actual number came in at $9,831 in 1819. We've applied the 3.2% decline in our current year estimate to come to $9,520, and then we projected a 1% increase, as the league suggested, for the next fiscal year of $9,610. Okay, any questions about that one?
I just have a question in general.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, if we look at 2018, 2019 actual, which was 9830, and the budget was 8940, that additional income, does it just go back to the general fund?
I mean, it just means that our revenues came in higher than we projected, and so really, yes, it's in the general fund, available.
I mean, it's like a bonus of, from what we projected, we were conservative. We ended up with more than what we projected, so that's just added income for that year.
That's correct. It's icing on the cake. It's money we didn't anticipate.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, the next revenue source is on page 11, and this is our PAL bill revenue. To qualify for PAL bill funds, a municipality must maintain public streets within its jurisdiction that are not part of the state highway system. We can use the PAL bill money primarily to resurface our town streets, but we may also use it to repair and maintain our streets, which includes our bridges, our curbs, our gutters, and our sidewalks. Prior to 2015, 2016, the PAL bill distribution had been tied to the state's motor fuels tax. But now PAL bill is actually an appropriation of funds from the General Assembly. 75% of the appropriation is allocated based on our population, and the remaining 25% is allocated based on the number of town-maintained street miles in each municipality. The General Assembly does plan to keep the appropriation unchanged from 2019-20 at $147.5 million. But they are allocating an additional $7.375 million to municipalities with a population of $200,000 or less. So we should benefit from that. The league is projecting that we should, when we do our budget, that we should budget at $19.11 per capita and $1,580.13 per mile for the upcoming budget year. So following that formula, that does give us budgeted revenue of $344,400.
Quick question and clarification, Pam.
Yeah.
Third Bergadot from the end, the General Assembly plans to keep the appropriation unchanged from the 2019, blah, blah, blah. With a population of $200,000, or is that 200,000 people or less?
That should be 200,000 people. Yeah,
Okay.
Mark through that dollar sign.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. All right. Any other questions? Okay, that does it for our state shared revenues. If you'll turn to page 12, we do have some other revenue sources. One of our larger revenue sources is our ABC board revenue. This revenue source is a distribution of profits from the Triad Municipal Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. Our ABC board revenue has steadily grown over the last several years. Alcohol sales, of course, are recession proof. Based on current year sales to date and the trend that I just mentioned, we are projecting that current year revenues will end well above budgeted levels, or at least, and at the very least, hold steady in the next fiscal year. So you can see that our ABC board revenue in 2018-19 was $173,744. I'm estimating that our current year revenues will come in at $177,480 based on how they're performing so far. And then for our budget, I'm budgeting or recommending a budget of $150,000 for the next fiscal year.
A question there, please, Pam. So
Yeah.
these monies are coming from Triad Municipal Alcoholic Beverage, not just from our individual ABC store.
No, it's a distribution of profits when they combine all of their stores.
How many stores are there? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I could look that up for you and get back to you though.
Okay, you can. That's something can wait.
And
Okay.
Pam, so
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
if the actuals for the last two budgets have come in around 170s, why are we going down to 150?
It's again a conservative estimate.
Okay.
With COVID-19, I'm just not comfortable budgeting any higher than that.
Okay.
Although we did say that the consumption of alcohol is essentially recession proof, right?
That's what I'm told.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Any other
any more
questions or
questions?
comments? Okay, the next revenue source is our occupancy tax. This is collected from Forsyth County, and when we collect this money, it must be used by the town of Louisville for economic development and cultural and recreational purposes, so it is restricted. Occupancy tax has also steadily grown over the last several years, and we are projected so far to come in over budget with this revenue source as well. So you can look back and see that in 18-19, we collected $45,468. I'm estimating that this current fiscal year will come in at $46,640. In the budget for next year, I've budgeted $40,000 as a conservative estimate.
And that's for hotels and motels, even though we don't have any, we do benefit.
Yeah, even though there are several municipalities in Forsyth County that do not have any hotels, but we do still benefit a small part from the hotels in Forsyth County.
Is there any benefit to trending this over more years than two?
I do have that information if you'd like me to send it to you.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I would personally, I don't know if anybody else would want to see that or not. But.
Just for occupancy tax or all the revenue sources?
Well, all of these, the ones we've just been talking about for the last 4 or 5 pages.
How far do you usually go back? 5 years or 3 years, or I mean?
I think I've got it back 4 years right now in detail.
Okay. I'd be interested in that too.
Yeah, Jean Marie would as well.
I'll just send it out to everybody. It'll have every revenue source in it.
All right, that's fine.
Okay.
I would just say that this is the only revenue source that I really think that might not meet expectations as we go forward right here. I'll just say that because I don't know how quickly things are going to pick up, from the soccer park in Clemens and the hotels being filled there to whatever else going on at the convention center and hotels in downtown Winston-Salem being filled up. And this is collected county-wide, so this one may fall short. Otherwise, I think all the projections have been real, real good, but this is one that is definitely up in the air as far as a revenue source.
Yeah, and Pam, Marie, I don't see a league assumption on this one or some of the others.
It's because it's not a state shared revenue. It's a local tax.
Okay.
And so we basically predict it on trend.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying is, you know, I leave the numbers the way they are when it comes to this budget. This is one that may fall short, but it
Sure.
does. It's only $40,000,
Mhm.
the whole budget item.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree, Fred.
It's a local revenue source. Who distributes this money, Pam?
Forsyth County.
Okay. Do we know what's going on from the county side, what they're projecting in terms of revenue from this source? Or do they give that to you or no?
No, they do not give that to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Quick question again, please. It's Jane Pam.
Mhm.
I know these checks come in at different times. What time of the year have they all pretty well hit?
The occupancy tax comes in monthly with about a 2-month lag.
Mhm.
Are you just talking about that one or other ones?
I think in general, yeah, when do you pretty well have everything that you were looking for to come in?
Sales tax comes in on a 2-month lag. The utility sales taxes on electricity, pipe, natural gas, telecommunications, and video programming, that's actually quarterly. So that's about a 2.5-month lag on those.
Chiming back in, Pam. I missed what you said about the occupancy tax. What is it? You say monthly or bi-monthly, or what did you say?
It comes in monthly with a
Monthly.
2-month lag.
Okay, well we should be able to see a trend going forward. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if you'll turn to page 13. Our next revenue source are investment earnings. Our investment income comes from the town's investment in 2 mutual funds that are administered by the North Carolina Capital Management Trust. These mutual funds are certified by the North Carolina Local Government Commission, and they are only available to governments in North Carolina for investment. The first fund that we invest in is called the Government Fund. The portfolio consists of U.S. Treasury obligations and U.S. government agency debt. For instance, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Federal Home Loan Bank, etc. When I looked at the rate of return in February of 2020, it was 1.378%. In March, it had already dropped to 0.928%. So I think it is going to obviously keep dropping with the economy. You can see the following amounts that we do have invested in the government fund at this point in time. We do have about $9.1 million invested. The second fund that we are able to invest in is called the Term Fund. The portfolio for the Term Fund is made up of prime quality commercial paper. If you're not familiar with that, commercial paper is unsecured short-term debt instruments that are issued by corporations to meet short-term needs, like inventory. The rate of return in February of 2020 was 1.574%, but the returns for that fund have also been declining. Until mid-March, I did have a little over $1 million in that fund, but I have transferred it since then to the government fund. I felt a little safer with that. With the predicted economic decline and a possible recession looming, I have budgeted this particular revenue source a lot lower than the current year, obviously. I've actually looked back to the returns that we received back in 2008 and 2009. So I'm only budgeting investment income from our money to come in at $7,900 in this next fiscal year. That may be highly conservative. it may be too conservative, but not knowing how the economy is going to perform or how quickly it's going to rebound after the pandemic, I did not feel comfortable budgeting any higher than that.
But all this money now is in government-backed securities, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
All right.
Okay, sorry, Pam, another quick question, please. When you transfer that money, you transfer to the government fund, do you have to have approval from anybody for that, or a limit when you transfer? Or since it's government funds, then that's got the stamp of okay on it? How does that work?
If you look back at the financial, I think it's called the Comprehensive Financial Management Policy, the previous council passed, and I passed out to all of you guys during our orientation. It does state in there that 2 areas where I'm allowed to invest are these particular funds. And so there is no restriction between trading in between.
All
I
right.
do not have to have permission from council, I should say.
Okay, yep, that was my question there. Thank you.
And recognize that it could just be sitting in a savings account. At least we're earning something.
Exactly. Yeah. And we were actually doing quite well. I still predict that our earnings this year will be about $83,000. So. Okay, on page 14, our last bit of revenue items fall under miscellaneous income. These are just some small revenue sources, and I'll just run through them very quickly. The first 2 line items there are the permit fees. This is, I suppose, if anybody wants to go door to door in Louisville and sell, they come to us to fill out an application, and there's a $10 fee that goes with that application. Usually we only collect about $20 a year from that particular source. The next line item, gas tax refund. When we pay for gas at the pump, we do pay a gas tax, and we're eligible to get that refunded. So we do get about $200 per year refunded on that each year. We no longer have any magistrate facility fees because we don't have magistrate court any longer at our annex. The next line item is cable franchise.
I'm sorry, when did that end?
That ended in, let's see, it ended in 2018-19. I don't remember the exact time, but it was last fiscal year.
Okay.
As far as the cable franchise tax, that also ended, or that agreement ended in 2018. I believe it was in August of 2018, so that's no longer a revenue source for us. We also collect money for temporary sign permits, stormwater plan review fees. We collect money when we obviously lease out the community center and Jack Warren Park and the gazebo at the square. We collect recreation facility fees for that, for residents and non-residents. Then we also have planning and developer fees and just any other miscellaneous revenue. And when I budgeted those, I basically just budgeted based on trends. But none of those are particularly material.
Okay, Pam, I see a change of 2019-20 estimated on planning developer fees going from averaging around 11,000 the last couple years, and then we're going to budget 5,000. So that's about half of what we have been pulling in on average. Do we expect, and maybe this is a question for Stacy, do we expect more developers to be coming in this coming fiscal year for those fees?
It could be. It's something that I don't ever really know until a plan comes across my desk. So, or somebody comes in and sees me. I mean, we have a couple waiting in the wings right now, but obviously that would be like this fiscal year, not next fiscal year, if they can, whatever happens with this virus and everything. But I mean, it kind of varies. It just, okay. We don't really have any way to know when somebody has a plan or when they don't until they actually come in the office.
Sure. And so this 13,500 that we're seeing there, do we know how many that was, Pam, or?
Oh,
I would have to look that up, but I can get that to you tomorrow,
Yeah, great, thank you.
just on the developer fees.
Yes, please.
Pam, it's Jean Marie.
Yeah.
So, so it looks like then to Melissa's question, so what was your assumption? Again, this isn't really material, but when you went from the 13.5 to the 5, your assumption was just all COVID, or?
That, and to be honest with you, it's just hard to predict, just like Stacy said.
Okay.
There was a time where we did not budget anything for that line item, just because it was so unpredictable.
Yeah, okay,
Um,
got it. Thank you.
mhm. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm just going to end on the next page. You see a graph just so you can see what percentage each revenue source is to the town. Ad valorem, of course, is our largest at 52%. I'm on page 15, by the way. You can see that local sales tax is our second highest at 17%. The other state shared revenues come in at 15%, PAL bill at 7%. Our ABC board revenues 3%, and miscellaneous income 1%. And you see another piece of the pie there, appropriated fund balance. And we will talk about that a little bit later when we dig into expenses. So I'll ask you to kind of be patient on that one.
Very good.
Okay, everybody had a lot of questions. Is there if anybody wants me to dig any deeper into any of those questions, you can either ask me now or you could send me an email tomorrow. I'll be glad to look up anything I can find.
Would you just send me an electronic version of the budget?
Okay,
I couldn't find it anywhere in an email. I don't know if anybody had sent it earlier or not, but I overlooked it if it was sent.
okay, you do have the book. You do have the book, though, correct?
I do.
Okay.
But I have a little bit of a visual deficit, so it's sometimes easier for me if I have it in the electronic format, then I can blow it up on my screen.
Okay, I can do that.
We can certainly do that, Fred. Ken.
Does anybody else want it in electronic format?
Jean Marie does.
Okay. Okay, any other requests?
I can have that too, Pam. That'd be great.
Is that Bo?
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Pam,
moving
I'm sorry, I just wanted to tell Pam how much we appreciate her putting this all together, and especially how conservative you are on what you expect with what our incomes will be coming in.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you, Pam.
Okay, moving on to expenses.
Mayor,
Yes,
Oh.
Fred.
would this be a good place to call it a night for tonight, first go around, before we get into the expenses? Nothing says we have to go to 9 o'clock.
No, nothing does. What's your pleasure, council?
I think once we start digging into the expenses, it can get a little bit lumpy. So I'm good with calling it an evening for now, maybe regroup.
I agree.
Everybody's good?
I
Yep.
agree.
Good.
Dave, very good. Okay.
And I'd like to make one closing remark as we're looking at the revenues coming in. And I know Pam deferred this to later, the appropriated fund balance. We've always included a bit of that every year. And looking back at some of the previous budgets that I've got the paper copies here at the house and so forth, I don't think we've ever really gotten into the appropriated fund balance, and we've always, but due to the conservative estimates of the revenues, have come in and added to the fund balance. So I'm proud of what our manager and what Pam, as finance director, has done for us in presenting this budget to use a minimal amount of the fund balance potentially. And still maintain the current tax rate. That's what we've always focused upon. So I've been involved with several of these, at least the last 4 or 5 budgets. We're definitely heading down the right road. When we get into expenses, I know we're going to have some discussions, and that's good. But the revenues that are coming in are basically what they're going to be, And I think Pam and Hank have done a real good job in a conservative mode in projecting what we can sort of bank on and what we may need to pick up out of our fund balance to actually make a balanced budget come June 30th. And that's the key, is to have a balanced budget June 30th. And with that, I'm going to mute.
I've got a question, Mayor, or Pam.
Go ahead, Jean Marie.
So just in prepping us for next time, especially since it's my first time going through the budget, any suggestions on what you would recommend that we do to get our arms around the expenses? I mean, I've got your pages 34 through 37 where it looks like you make a lot of the assumptions, but beyond that, anything else?
Let me chime in a little bit. We're going to have what we have customarily done over the last few years is give you sort of a departmental highlight on expenditures that are out of the ordinary for whatever reason. They've gone down, they've gone up. What we don't pay a lot of attention to with this, unless you guys really want to do this, is more of the mundane expenditure items that are fairly often the same thing from one year to the other. I do always want to make sure that you guys are aware of things that are out of the ordinary and are representing a big change one way or the other in these departmental line items.
Jean Marie, we've kind of not gone through each department line by line, because there are things in there like printing and gas and lots of minutia, important stuff, but things that really don't make a big difference overall in the budget. What Hank has done and Pam have done in the last several years is that where we've had large additions or large reductions, they footnoted those so they can highlight those by each department. And if we can actually continue that process, we will save an abundant amount of time, rather than arguing about whether we want to do printing for $3,000 or printing for $2,500. That makes sense.
Sure. So again, from a process standpoint, I thought it was very helpful what you did tonight, Pam. That was, you just kind of walked us through. I understand the assumptions. I know where to go back and to dig further into any assumptions. It looks like your expenses are a little different. How are you going to be walking us through? If you could just tell me that, I think that would help me to know how to prepare myself.
Okay, well, you referred to pages 34 through 37.
Yeah.
Those are basically the highlights that come out of each, I guess, each department. And basically, Hank is he's going to start by talking about personnel and salaries and benefits. And then he's going to start going through each of the departments, starting with governing body, and basically go through all of these highlights. What you may want to do is I would suggest maybe taking a ruler and just kind of go down each line item, starting with, let's say, if you turn to governing body on page 17.
Yep.
You see all the line items for governing body, and you might just take a ruler, and if you want to look at anything that just you want to talk about, anything looks unusual to you, or a significant increase or a significant decrease, or just anything you might want to talk about. But other than that, Hank will pretty much be hitting the major points in each department, and he won't really get into the weeds. So, if you just see anything that catches your eye, that's what I would suggest.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We'll do it.
Very good. Any more questions? Ms.
Thank
Welch.
You're muted.
Sorry. Yes, what was helpful to me in reading through it, like on page 17, there were like 17 items. I listed 1 through 17 on the left, and then on the far right, I listed the numbers, corresponding numbers, so I could quickly say like number 1, salaries, and then find number 1 over there easily. That was helpful to me instead of needing a ruler necessarily, just numbering them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Sure.
Will we have those projections or the past, what you're sending over about the revenues? Do you have that same thing for expenses?
No, I don't.
Okay.
If there's anything in particular you want, though, I can dig that out.
Okay.
Very good. Any more comments?
Great job, Pam.
Thank you.
Thumbs up, guys. Good start.
Thanks,
Okay,
Hank.
so ladies and gentlemen, we want to, again, thank you for joining us. I know it sounds a little bit tedious at times as we go through these, but it's all important information for those of you who are interested in how your town functions, and certainly from a line item and an expense and revenue standpoint. This is a great way to get an education on how we not only appropriate, but how we spend your money. Do want to do one reminder. If you haven't filled the census form and sent it back in, please do that. We are running about 60% return in Louisville, and I think we can do a lot higher than that. So if you haven't sent back your mailed in return, please do that. Mrs. Walker is nodding at me saying, thank you for the census reminder, Mike. Mr. Franklin would scold me, I think, if I didn't also remind you to please go give blood, redcross.org. Anything else?
I'd like to mention one thing to Pam and to Hank, just very quickly before we get into the next week's discussions. On page 29, under stormwater, contracted services, account number 6,000, last 4 digits is 6,000. It has a figure listed of $10,000. If I look on page 36 under stormwater, it has a listed of $6,000, which is a $4,000 difference. And there's multiple instances of that between what's in the bound book and what's on the pages that were paperclipped together and so forth. So just an explanation of that when we get back together. Otherwise, I'll probably be questioning as we go through this piece of it and all. Okay. But the numbers aren't jiving there. If you
Can I go ahead? Would you like me to go ahead and address that one?
If you will.
Okay. That's the $10,000 you see on page 29 is made up of 2 numbers. One is $6,000 that we've allocated for stormwater reviews. And the other $4,000 is miscellaneous for any other contracted items that might come up in the stormwater department.
Well, so that wasn't showing up. That wasn't showing up anywhere else. That's the reason I mentioned that. And you take 4,000 here and 4,000 there, it adds up after a bit. It's the only reason I was bringing that up. So as we go through this, when the numbers don't match, if you'll just tell us how they match up, Pam, that'll be good as we go forward.
All right. Like I said, just mark anything you want explanations of, and I'll be glad to address them during the budget meeting.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Very good. Any other matters to come before the council this evening? I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Dr. Sadler makes the motion. Mr. Smitherman makes the second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Oops, hold on. Mrs. Walker? You're on mute. There you go.
I'm on mute. Do you want to adjourn the meeting or do you want to continue the meeting?
Well, that's a really good question because we set these up as individual budget meetings.
I only have the one agenda, so that's why I asked.
Okay.
Bo, what's your suggestion?
I think we've continued them in the past.
I
think we have too. Yeah.
So let's see who, Dr. Sadler, if you would modify your motion to continue this to our next meeting date.
So modified.
And Mr. Smitherman, if you would accept that.
I accept.
Very good. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good rest of your evening.